We're back in Europe, and that means there is something of an ode to joy from all of the engineers up and down the pit lane. Well, apart from at two teams who didn't bring any upgrades at all to Imola. The rest of the teams, though, brought a huge amount of new bits and bobs to their cars for this weekend. And there are some really intriguing challenges and differences on display at the Autodromo Enzo Adino Ferrari. So where best to start than Ferrari themselves? Now, out on track during free practice one, we saw a really intriguing little situation with Charles Leclerc, who was struggling to keep his helmet on his head on the fast sections of the circuit. Now, this is something that happens occasionally to drivers due to a low pressure area over the cockpit. And if the team haven't managed the shaping of the cockpit or the shaping of the helmet quite right, the airflow over the cockpit can literally suck the driver's upper safety equipment off their heads, or try to, quite significantly. So a number of devices are employed to avoid this effect. Here we can see an older version of Charles Leclerc's helmet, and you can see this little spoiler around the leading edge, around his chin, just about here. That's all to do with managing that effect, and you can see that's been fitted to Leclerc's helmet for this weekend. And this section on the back to stop the helmet just being lifted up by that low pressure area over the car. Now, something we have to take a look at, though, is how the teams fight that. And we saw Ferrari fighting it quite significantly in free practice one. Charles Leclerc was asking for a number of these different perspex screens to be fitted to the front of the car. The first one Ferrari fitted wasn't big enough, didn't have a big enough effect, so then they went and fitted another bigger version. But crucially, taking a look at Lewis Hamilton out on track, he didn't complain of the same issue at all. You can see here at the front of his cockpit, you can see just where the back of the halo picks up, you can see there's absolutely no screen whatsoever. But we also heard no complaints from Hamilton about his helmet lifting at speed. So something quite interesting going on there. Maybe it's the different helmet specifications between the two drivers, or maybe Ferrari doing something slightly different with the rear facing of the halo, or maybe Hamilton's just a bit more able to cope with that effect. But really unusual to hear that in Formula One. But if you've ever driven an open-top single-seater or sports car, you do feel that effect really, really strongly sometimes. So something Ferrari have got to deal with. Something else Ferrari have got to deal with is the rear end of their car. It's fair to say they have been having a few problems, and at Imola they have introduced a little bit of an upgrade. They've modified the rear brake cooling duct, and that is a big topic of discussion in the paddock at Imola, and we will be talking about McLaren in a few moments. However, Ferrari have made some changes around the back, but the biggest change that Ferrari are waiting for to be able to get the rear of their car working in the way that both of their drivers want is still to come. We understand it's a mechanical change. I believe it's something to do with the gearbox casing and the mounting and the design of the rear suspension. It's a major change on the SF25. It will be very expensive in terms of financial costs and also very expensive in terms of development costs. And let's not forget, all that development work you put onto this year's car takes out of next year's car when you've got that big new rulebook coming in. And that is a big risk for Ferrari, but they do need to do something to get Hamilton and Leclerc a bit closer to Red Bull. And Red Bull, of course, are doing quite a lot of work to stay in front of Ferrari and also to try and catch up McLaren. Really interesting upgrade package on the cars at Imola, and something that perhaps, well, definitely has been inspired by McLaren is this side pod extension just on the leading edge and the upper edge of the side pod duct. Now, I remember when Mercedes first had these extensions back in 2022 sticking out of the side pod above the main duct. Red Bull made a few unfriendly noises about, oh, is it really legal? Yes, it was legal. But since then, McLaren have adopted a little extension, Ferrari have got little extensions above the side pod duct, and now Red Bull has joined the party with their ducts. However, Red Bull's also introduced another really intriguing new component underneath the side pod. You can just see it here on the screen, this little strake or turning vane or sticky downy bit, if you like, underneath the leading edge of the side pod. Clearly an aerodynamic part to channel airflow, to do some special stuff down there above the leading edge of the floor. Without a wind tunnel, you're never really going to know what that does. But Red Bull really doing some interesting stuff around the part of the side pod that a lot of people are looking at anyway in terms of car development. Here you can really see that extension, how it sticks out from the end of the side pod, picks up on the mirror support, and also leads in to the main body of the car. There's that upper lip you see. Here's the blanked off side pods duct. That's something that they do always in the show and tell sessions because they don't want to lose heat under the bodywork. And there you can see that new strake under the body. And it's that strake, I think, that's really going to attract the attention of a number of teams, because that's something nobody's done before. It's a new area of development on the car. It's a bit clever. It's a bit interesting. Does it really work? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Neither driver at Red Bull seemed particularly happy with their car in free practice one. Another subtle change at the back of the Red Bull worth noting is the cooling slots. They were deleted for free practice at Imola due to the perhaps higher than expected average speed around the Italian circuit. And as you can see, there's a blanking panel here ahead of the main cooling outlet, whereas in previous races, they've had a guild panel in that same location, sometimes quite open like that, sometimes a bit more closed, but completely closed up to reduce drag for this weekend. The more intriguing change, though, at the rear of the Red Bull can be seen up here. Red Bull has introduced new brake cooling outlets and inlets on the rear of their car. And Red Bull have been at the heart of all of these discussions about rear tyre temperatures and what exactly is McLaren doing. Going back even as far as last year, Red Bull was suggesting that McLaren was somehow putting water into the tyres when they were inflating them to try and control the rear temperatures. That was looked into, turned out to not be true. And there was a bit of jesting going on from Zak Brown on the pit wall in recent races with a drinks bottle marked tyre water. And they had that on there just to wind up their competitors. But it is true that McLaren are able to use their rear tyres a little bit better, a little bit differently to any of the competition. And there have been some wild theories on the internet in recent weeks about what exactly McLaren are doing at the back end of their car. Apparently, somebody managed to get hold of some thermal images of the brake cooling outlets on the car. Now, that's not easy to do because when you use a thermal imager in the pit lane, I know, I've done it, it's not subtle. These are fairly large pieces of kit to get any sort of accuracy. You will have to have access to the pit lane during a running session, probably free practice 2, because that's where you see long runs, and you need to see a car on a long run to get the data on what it's doing at the rear tyre accurately. Otherwise, you're not going to get the temperatures, and you have to do it before the teams put the leaf blowers onto the rear wheels. Not an easy moment to get, and I think it's going to be pretty obvious to see anybody in the pit lane with a thermal imager. What these thermal images purport to show, though, at the rear of the McLaren, is that some of the cooling channels on the exit of the brake cooling system have some cool spots on them. It's ejecting cooler air than would be expected. There are some suggestions that the thermal images also show the cake tin temperatures. I'm not sure that's correct. Not quite sure how you'd be able to get those images during a pit stop because the wheel isn't exposed for very long at all. So bit of a question mark about that, bit of a mystery about what's really going on. There have been, though, as I say, some utterly wild theories spread around on the internet about phase change materials. Absolutely really compelling idea, but I'm not entirely sure it's strictly legal because it might constitute a movable aerodynamic device and it might fall foul of a couple of other FIA technical regulations as well. But that's not to say McLaren aren't doing something clever at the rear of the car. They absolutely are. We just don't know what it is, and they won't let us take the rear wheel and braking system apart. We know, we asked them, they didn't even bother replying because, well, you know what the answer would be. I'd still love to do that, though. If anybody from McLaren's watching, can we take your car apart, please? No? Didn't think so. What they've done, perhaps, is create some sort of clever routing of the airflow, some channeling inside the air duct to manage that flow in a way that nobody's ever done before, perhaps calling on some of that expertise they had from all the way back when they had the F-duct on the front of the car for a drag reduction system. Hard to say exactly what's going on, but don't trust the internet rumours. We don't really know what's going on, other than the FIA took a good look at Oscar Piastri's rear braking system following the Miami Grand Prix and didn't find anything illegal whatsoever. So I think McLaren have just done something very clever in terms of the cooling flows through the rear brakes. We just don't know what those are, and don't get sucked in by too many internet theories, which is generally quite good advice for life. McLaren had a new rear wing on their car this weekend as well. We haven't talked enough about that. But we will go on to talk about some of the other details on some of the other cars because there's just so much to get through here at Imola, which brings me from one Mercedes-powered car to another. The Mercedes, of course. And Mercedes has taken some really clear inspiration from the McLaren team. Here's the rear upper wishbone pickup point on the chassis at Imola. And it's got a beautiful wing section, clearly designed to generate a little bit of downforce. The lower wishbone mount you can see here as well is coming up in the same way. And Mercedes making some really interesting upgrades to their car, which hasn't been completely uncompetitive this season. And to find out a little bit more about what Mercedes have been doing, Greg Stewart is down in the pit lane to find all of the answers.
Something quite easy to spot on the front suspension, the little flick-ups at the end.
Yeah.
Is that contributing load to the car directly?
Yeah, we are trying always to add load into the car in an efficient way, and also try to have load in all the various conditions for the car attitude on the track. So it's a little step, but it's in a positive direction.
And talk to us also about the area known colloquially as the Coke bottle area. What are the changes been around that part of the car, and what's that for?
Yeah, it's mainly in the central engine cover of the car, and it's got some relationship also to the cooling level, and again, another little step, but all positive in the positive direction.
James Allison has been quite clear that the car is having issues. It can get tyres up to temperature very quickly over one lap. Then in the race, it's a little bit harder to maintain the temperature. So is this upgrade seeking to address that issue at all?
Not in particular. I mean, of course, always adding load goes in the right direction for the car, but this is not particularly aimed in improving the pace, but just in improving general performance overall, both in quali and the race.
Well, that's really interesting stuff down there from Greg. And from one legendary team with a Mercedes engine, Mercedes, to another legendary name with a Mercedes engine. Let's take a look at Aston Martin. They've not had the best start to the season so far, it's fair to say. And for Imola, the team has made a major step forward, at least they hope so, with a major upgrade package. And to find out more about that upgrade package, once again, Greg is in the pit lane looking for answers.
Eric, big changes to your car this weekend. Can you just talk us through them?
Yeah, so we have brought our first package of the year here in Imola. So we've got a new bodywork, new floor, new beam wing, which is a lower element of the rear wing, and also some modification around the cockpit.
2 years ago, we know that you were scoring podiums frequently, and the regulations have remained stable. So just talk to us about this car's strong and weak points.
Well, I think we through development we have probably took the wrong direction in certain area. I think the car has got some strong points, and we have improved a lot compared to last year in certain area. But we haven't not improved everywhere, and that is our main focus at the moment. Is to try to effectively reduce the weakness of the car, and we have identified them, so it's just a matter of working through them.
Well, perhaps the biggest upgrade, though, for Aston Martin wasn't to the car itself, it was to the team's factory near the Silverstone circuit with its shiny new wind tunnel. And when you get a new wind tunnel, it does come with a few risks because not all wind tunnels are the same and not all wind tunnels give the right data according to the car on track. That's called correlation. And if you want to know a little bit more about that, head over to F1 TV, where Professor Willem Tok gives me a really good talking to about exactly how teams struggle with correlation. But before you go and do that, here's Greg again.
So we started this package still in a Mercedes wind tunnel that we are renting out. But we have finished it in our wind tunnel. It was very useful to actually be in our wind tunnel. We've got slightly different technology there, and it has highlighted a few things that helped us to deliver the package. For the team, it's a massive benefit to have the wind tunnel on the same site that the campus, and we are able also to work, during the week instead of the weekend. So it has been a massive step forward for us, and it is a beautiful facility. It's initially the first week have been a bit difficult because it was still very new, but now it's working fine, and it's great really to have it.
Sticking on the topic of Aston Martin, there is one mystery on this car that has been bugging me since I first saw it in pre-season testing. And what I'm talking about, of course, is this little duct alongside the driver's helmet. Now, this is an area of the car that no other team has really exploited, and we don't really know what it's for. So, Inspector Greg has been sleuthing with Aston Martin in the pit lane, and we finally, I believe, has an answer to what on earth is that all about.
So it's a small duct that we use to effectively take some of the losses that are coming from the cockpit, and it's going alongside the chassis to keep the fuel tank cool. That's it.
Well, that is not only absolutely fascinating, cooling the fuel tank, but it's also utterly intriguing. And I think that's the real story of the car upgrades here at Imola, is that there's more questions than answers, more mysteries than solutions, and it's absolutely wonderful because we've got a few really interesting races to come up to try to get to the bottom of what is really going on some of these cars. And there's more upgrades that we haven't even studied yet. So if you want to know more about those, stay tuned here with Tech Talk.